With this slide lecture, we're going to talk about the visual elements in art. Now, much of our visual and tactile experience in life is beyond words. We can't really express it in words, but there is in fact a language of art. And as we explore the language in art, then it makes us more able to speak with one another and to share our ideas about art. What we're going to look at with the visual elements are line, shape, light, value, color, texture, and space, time, and motion, which sort of go together. Line defines a shape, while light reveals it. Color can describe the world around us and express emotions within us. Texture affects our tactile senses. Cold rock or a warm flesh, holding a baby, for example, versus holding a stone. We exist in space, and yet we're surrounded by it. Now, the space surrounding a work of art is often just as important as the work of art itself. This is especially true when we look at sculpture or at architecture. And we are all in motion constantly. So, as we look at this language, we can better communicate our ideas and our responses to a work of art. In addition, for your final visual assignment, we'll be returning to these visual elements. So line. Line is defined as an infinite number of points, but in art, line has a wider meaning. The picture of this little boy below offers an example of something that I love to see and love to do when drawing. That's called a lost and found line. You can see where the artist has been heavy-handed with his instrument, with his pencil, and then as he goes down the boy's back, he's used it softer and softer until the line just fades. And this gives us a glimpse of the artist's experience, of his actual experience of making the drawing. And it brings a softness into this image. Now, the image on the upper left is the artist Kathy Kulowitz. Now, she had a very difficult life. She lost most all of the men in her life to World War I and World War II. This would be her father, her son, her grandfather, her husband. They died in the war. And as a result, her images tend to really reflect this anguish that she experienced in her life. Now, for this one, even though that we know she's a very gifted visual artist, notice how she's chosen to take that line to make the line in her arm by taking her charcoal and going rapidly up and down. Now, this gives a feeling of agitation to the picture, but it also makes me think that she's moving, that the arm is an arm in motion. Now, if we look down at the photograph by Edward Weston, that's actually, two knees. And it's a form. It's not line at all. But as we look more closely, we can see that his image brings us very strong linear feeling, even though it's a three-dimensional form. So here's some tricks when you're making art, that vertical lines are assertive and they tend to defy gravity and go upward, which we see a lot in the cathedrals. Diagonal lines convey movement. We see this in Monet's painting here on the right. You can see that the train is in motion. And horizontal lines convey rest and peace. Now, in each of these images, line is the dominant feature, and it creates the mood of the drawing. I want to point out this one to the lower left, and because it's a drawing by Rembrandt. And in this one, I just love his use of very simple lines. He's just, with a few lines, made a very touching image of his wife sleeping. And this was his beloved wife who died. I think she was 31 when she died. She died quite young. Now we're going to look at shape. We always hear about shaping up and getting in shape. Well, in art, shape is defined as an area within a composition that has boundaries that separate it from its surroundings. The interaction of shapes within a composition form the foundation upon which that composition is built. Notice how each of these works uses shapes to a specific effect. Now, one thing I want you to notice about the painting on the left is that little bottle on the right corner of the windowsill. Why is that there? The artist chose to put that there to break up the rhythm of the circles and squares that are in the shape of the windowsill. Now, this image to the top is a very famous painting from Japan, and one of the things that always strikes me about it is it's used to convey peace, but there's these guys in these little bitty rowboats that are about to have a wave crash down upon them. I always wonder about them. So we have positive and negative shapes in space. Now, you've probably all seen this image on the left of the vase. Tell me, is it two profiles or is it a vase? It's all in the negative and the positive space. What we have when we say positive and negative space is either the area of the shape itself or the air around the shape itself. So look at that drawing it's an etching by M.C. Escher at the bottom of your screen on the right. Look at the fish. You see how the shapes around the fish turn into birds as we go upwards? That's a key to looking at positive and negative space. And then what once was fish becomes negative space. Now, in drawing, the negative space is key. If you can't quite get something to work out, you can simply study the shapes of the negative space and your rendering will become more accurate. Now, here's something we call mass, which means the weight of the object, but it can also be an illusion. Let's look at two of these images to provide an example here. On the left, we have this, what is actually a bronze jacket. Somebody just did a cast of this jacket and cast it in bronze, and now we have this very heavy object hanging as an object of art. Now on the right, what is this called? Questioner of the Sphinx. It looks heavy because of how the artist has rendered it, but it is in fact simply a painting. Now this is an interesting use of mass where the artist has made a solid granite, I think it's granite, it might be marble, no, it's concrete, 250 tons of concrete as the Holocaust memorial. And all of these sort of that checkerboard pattern, the squares, the rectangles in the side of this shape are designed to represent books, because the Jewish people are known as the people of the book for their the scholarly aspect of the religion. So this is very moving because what you have is the great wealth of information that was lost with all the people killed in the Holocaust, and the solid mass of stone or of cement that appears to be almost like a tombstone. So now we have color. Color is such a vast subject, we can really only touch upon it here. We're surrounded by color and it influences our emotional responses and affects our unconscious impulses in life. So bright red often leads to agitation, or is supposed to be an agitating color. But did you know also that red will come toward you in a work of art? So, and the artist would want to have that in mind. If you look at this image on the lower right by Frederick Church, this was his response to the Civil War in the United States. He painted it in 1862. And you can see that it's like a chasm, a big rift in the middle of this valley, and the blood red brings to mind all the destruction in in the Civil War. So we have something called warm colors and cool colors. Now, you'll need to know that the warmest color would be orange or red, and the coolest colors are the blues. You can think of fire and ice. Now, warm colors come toward us, and cool colors go away from us. I invite you to all notice how colors affect you as you go through the coming week. Now, for the color wheel, what I want you to know is the three primary colors. What are they? And I'm not going to tell you, but you'll figure it out if you study the color wheel in front of you. Now, secondary colors are mixtures equally of the primary colors. I invite you to take some time to study this color wheel and see if you can learn about these different mixes of colors. For example, we have half yellow, half red is orange. Now, one of the interesting things about the color wheel is that if you go all the way across it, opposite, like yellow to violet, we'll do that one, and you mix them together, what do you get? Gray, neutral. So you can use this in a different way, that if you have opposites of the color wheel next to each other, they sort of vibrate. And this was used in something called op art in the 60s. And you see it a lot in school colors, like orange and blue is a classic school color because they have the contrast gives it an energy, a brightness. Now the trick to keep opposite colors working together is proportion. Like you have a little strip of red and a big strip of green, it will work. But if you have equal red and green stripes, it's going to be pretty loud. Okay, so now we're going to move on from color and look at value. Now here's something I want you to know for this class. Value means light and dark. We can see that value also means how much you like something or how much it means to you, but not in our course of study here. So value simply means the light and the dark, wow, what was that? The light and the dark of an object. So we have light. Light is essential in the artist's, it's an essential tool in the artist's playbook, so to speak. It's essential for life, but it also helps us to understand visual art. In order to make a form look like it has mass, the artist will carefully render the way that light hits the form. Understanding light and shadow is crucial to the artist. There's actually a specific lobe in our brain that has a theater for light. Now, of course, we see the effects of light much more than we see light itself. Here we have light and highly saturated colors. Now let's look at texture. Texture comes from a root that means weaving, weaving together. Now we have two kinds of texture in art. We have actual texture and we have implied texture. If you look at the three images on this page, the one above left by William McNamara and the one on the bottom right by the artist named Rosenquist, these are both paintings. So the artist has implied texture with the paintings. Now that picture of supplies upper right, well, that's real texture. Although it's a picture, so it's not. This is a fun thing. It's called subversive texture. And if you look at the one in the upper left made by the artist Oppenheim, doesn't it just kind of make you want to go with your tongue? Because you can't imagine drinking from a fur cup. But this is sort of a joke and a way to play with our sensibilities and how we perceive things. The one on the right by Dale Chihuly is called Chocolate Mousse, but it's actually made out of ceramic. So here we have time and motion. And there's a couple of things I want to look at here. Time is such a broad subject. Of course, upper left is one of the first string of images in early photography that actually showed motion. But I want to look at the upper right images because these are these talismans that these women make. They make out of rice flour and cow dung outside of their homes in India. They're supposed to bring sort of blessings to the home. And they do this and the monsoon rains wash them off and then they make them again. On the lower right here we have sand painting by a Navajo shaman that's designed to bring healing to this child. Now as soon as this is done, it's going to be destroyed. And the act of making the art is much more important than the result. Now here we have just these couple of really funny images by Salvador Dali. As we move through space, some art is actually in motion. Now I want to just point out that the image on the right, they say it took 26 attempts to do this image, as somebody held up a chair, the artist's wife threw water, and somebody else threw the cats. I just always want to know, what about the cats? So it looks like I'm at the end of my presentation. My 15 minutes are up, and we have two slides left to do on perspective.